Hey, Yensko, Adventures. Sinsko here, of course. Anyway, today is going to be a very different type of video. It's actually this evening. Today is actually April 26th, 2026, Sunday evening. And today I'm going to share a story. I know there's a lot of YouTube channels out there that basically what they do is they share really cool stories, true stories. Um, so I want to share a story that I heard many years ago, and I'm actually going to ask you guys to help me out a little bit, okay? I do not remember the name of the guy who told this story. Here's the background of how I heard this story. At the time, this was probably in the mid 90s, I was working at Jackson Middle School here in Oklahoma City Public Schools. We had a guest speaker who came in. He was Polish. He was a World War II survivor. And he told us this amazing life story. And I even remember he had some books about his life, autobiographies that he had written. But life was super busy for me back then. And even though I remember every part of his story, I do not remember his name, don't remember the name of his book. So maybe after you hear this story of this guy, if you know anything about it, leave something down here in the comments. Leave the name, leave information in the comments, because I would love to be able to get more information on this guy. All right. So again, I'm gonna set the scene. In the mid 90s, I'm at Jackson Middle School. We had a school-wide meeting in the auditorium to come hear this guy. I'm gonna assume one of the administrators had reached out to him, and he decided to come in and tell his life story. And his life story goes like this. So, the early stages of World War II, if you know anything about history, Poland had made a pact, a deal with Nazi Germany, that Nazi Germany would not invade them. If you know the history, Germany did not keep that part of the deal. Shortly after, they invaded Poland, took over Poland, and they persecuted Poles, especially anyone that was Jewish Pole. Also got to remember that Hitler he viewed Eastern Europeans as subhuman, almost the same way he viewed the Jews. And so this man who's telling the story, it was him, his brother. I know that for sure. I don't remember if he had another sibling, but I remember him talking about his mom and his dad. They were sent to a German camp. I believe what they called like a ghetto. They lost their home, they lost their property, they lost everything, and they were sent. And while they were there, his mother and his father passed away while they were in this ghetto. It wasn't like a concentration camp like you hear, like Auschwitz and places like that. That comes later in the story. But anyway, this guy, he probably would have been in his 20s at the time, or maybe late teens, early 20s. Him and his brother, he told the story about winter had come and it was getting really cold. And so at this time, the Germans had moved him and his brother, as well as many other Poles, people from Poland, to a concentration camp. And they stayed in the concentration camp for quite a few years. So as he's telling his story, I remember he started sharing how word was coming to the concentration camps. There were rumors. We're not allowed to talk about it, that Germany was actually it appeared that they were starting to lose the war, and the Allies were advancing. And what that did for every prisoner, it didn't matter where you were from, if you were Russian, if you were Jewish, or if you were Polish, no matter where you were, that gave people hope, because what they wanted more than anything else were just the Allies to come and liberate them. But the Nazis had a plan. And as he's telling his story, and I remember looking around in the auditorium there at Jackson, at the school in Japan, You could have heard a pin drop as this guy is telling his life story, including myself. I was standing up against the back wall, and I'm glued to what every word this guy's saying. Anyway, he goes on and he says that this is kind of near the end of the war, when Germany realized that they had a pretty good chance of losing the war. They did what they called their death marches. And what they would do is they would leave, 5 or 6 o'clock. This is during the winter, during the dead of winter, so 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. And what the Germans would do is they would march the prisoners out of the concentration camp, and they would just march them in the middle of the night with hardly any clothes on your back. That's what he described it to us. He said they had like slippers, something that would be compared to slippers. Some people were walking barefoot. Mind you, this is in Germany in the middle of winter. And as they would march, people would just start dropping. His friends, people that he knew, people would just fall over and they would freeze to death. He's told us that there would be Nazi trucks that would, in this like almost, I don't want to call it a caravan, but this big caravan of people that were marching with really no destination. The idea of the death march was just to march everyone until most people died, and then whoever survived is less ammunition to waste, and the Nazis would just kill everyone else. But the idea on a death march was to let the cold, the wind, the weather, freezing, kill most of the people in the march. And so he told us about the Nazi trucks would drive in the middle of this big group of people that were walking, and they could look up and they could see that the German soldiers had coffee and they were warm. And man, I can't even imagine how it made them feel, how it made this guy and his brother feel. So it's him and his brother, the only ones left, and they're walking this death march. And I remember he said it was past midnight, and they had waited because the Nazi trucks were going up and down, because they were kind of making sure that no one tried to escape. But I remember him also saying no one had the strength to escape except for him and his brother. So he said at one moment the truck had gone past, there was no one behind them, and they looked over to the right. I remember him even saying towards the right, and he saw a tree line, and he said, "This is when we go." And they took off running as fast as they could. They're marching that way, they ran that way. They didn't know if they were going to hear shots behind them, if they were going to be chased by the dogs, the German dogs, by the German soldiers. All they knew is they had to make it to that tree line. He said it was like 30, 40, 50 feet. They finally get into the thick of the tree line. They jump over. There was like some brush. They get over the brush, and they got really quiet, and they didn't move. I remember he said that they waited for about an hour until everybody in that march had gone past. No one saw them run. The Germans didn't see them run. And so they thought, maybe we're safe. Maybe we've made it. And so they still stayed there. And he said that it was his brother finally decided and said, "Hey, look, let's stay here till morning, because we don't know where we're going. I mean, it's dark, we're cold, we're freezing, we're hungry, haven't had anything to eat in days." So they stayed there till finally the sun started to rise, and then they kind of looked around. Everything's white, everything covered in snow. But he said everything was silent, completely silent. So they look around and they're like, "Okay, let's see what we can find." So they start to walk, and they're kind of walking next to this. It's where the people had walked in the march, and as they kept going, eventually they saw that it was a road that veered off where the people had marched. So they decide, "Hey, let's take this road." So they take this road, and they're walking, and they're exhausted, they're tired, they're freezing. But I remember him saying also the sun had come out. And so, man, it was like they saw that as a sign. Maybe they were getting warm. It gave them hope. So They keep walking, and eventually they came upon a farmhouse. But from the angle where they were looking at it, because they didn't want to get too close, they were not even sure exactly where they were. They didn't want to get caught and turn back in. So what they decided to do is they said, hey, let's spend this day, the rest of this day, because what they saw behind the farmhouse was a barn. Said, let's get into the barn. Chances are there'll be hay, there'll be something in there that we can warm ourselves up. Let's rest today, see if we can sleep tonight, and maybe tomorrow we can go and maybe see who lives in that house over yonder, if anyone actually lives in that farmhouse. So this is what the brothers did. So they went into the barn. No one was in there, but it was full of fresh hay. And so, it's cold. Hay can work. Hay works like a pretty good blanket. So they went to the back part of the barn. They grabbed hay. I remember him telling us they actually found some old blankets. They were like, man, this is best case scenario. So they wrapped themselves up in blankets and they covered hay on top of them. And he said the next thing they knew, they passed out. Sheer exhaustion. They slept that whole night. And the guy who's telling the story, I believe is the oldest brother, he said it was daybreak of the next morning. And what woke him up was sound of heavy engines rolling down the road that barn and that farmhouse was on. And instantly he became terrified. And so he's thinking, okay, maybe they'll just go on by, because after all, they're in this little barn and they're covered. But then he goes over to feel his brother, to kind of wake his brother up. And when he feels for his brother isn't down there. He's feeling for his brother. His brother is not where he thought he would be. And so he kind of uncovers himself a little bit, pushes the hay off, and there he sees his brother is standing at the door of the barn with the door open. And his brother is looking at whatever is making the loud noise, like a heavy truck. He's just looking at it like this. Doesn't say a word, but his eyes are huge, and he's just looking outside this barn, looking at this, what it sounds to be a military vehicle. And so the big brother is like, hey, get back over here. Man, he's hoping that they didn't see him, right? Like, man, hey, and then the younger brother runs out the door, and he's hollering and yelling. He couldn't even understand what he was saying, but he was saying, he was talking. He sounded really excited or really demented. And then the older brother's still inside the barn, and man, he's scared. He doesn't know what to do. He's like, man, do I go get him? What is going on? What's happening? Are they going to catch us again? And so he finally hears his brother. His brother finally seems to be calming down, or someone is starting to calm him down, but he doesn't know what to expect. So he finally pushes the blanket off of him. He stands up and he runs over to the door, and he looks out to see what his brother had seen. And this is what he saw. He saw a tank, army tank. And sticking out the hatch of that army tank was good old red, white, and blue. Old Glory. You see, that tank was American. And behind the tank were two military vehicles full of soldiers. When the soldiers saw this man's name, and can't remember it, and his brother, they showered them with blankets. They gave them food. They took care of them. They put them in the back of one of the military trucks. And eventually, the guy who told us this story, they eventually got back home to Poland. The war had ended. Germany had been defeated. And I remember in part of his story, because everything happened so fast, that the one desire he had was to meet the men in that tank, to thank them one last time. You see, a lot of times God operates in the most beautiful ways, and how God used his providence to put these men at the right place where they could be found and be rescued by the men of the United States Army. So, like I said, I heard this story a long time ago. I have never been able to get even the name of the man who shared his life story. And it's been so long ago. I've mentioned it to some kids, and the kids that I've talked to who were kids back then, students at Jackson Middle School, they don't remember. I know I didn't imagine this, but if you've heard the story of the two Polish brothers who escaped in a concentration camp, escaped the camp, and escaped a death march, and were found by some USGIs in a tank. And just imagine seeing that flag and knowing that you had been saved. So if you know anything about that, man, leave it in the comments. I would love to do more research. I don't even know if this guy is still alive. This was in the 90s, and he was up there in age, so chances are he's not, but I'd still love to get more information about him. So if you know anything, can help out with me locating and finding more information on the story, please comment below. Let me know what it is. I would love to do further research. So like I said, guys, this is a different type of video. I just wanted to share this story. Hopefully it didn't go too long. Hopefully it was interesting. Again, if you like it, give me a like. If you like to subscribe. I am working at Oklahoma City Public Schools now for 33 years. I really would like to retire, and I know that I get enough viewers and subscribers, I could do an early retirement and do this all the time. Also, just letting you know, spring is coming. It's getting warmer, so pretty soon I will be doing more videos with Cal Chando, as we're going to be going to the different lakes here in Oklahoma. Finally want to get back on the jet ski, hopefully sometime when the water gets warm and Oklahoma weather decides to cooperate with no tornadoes. But till then, I just may sit here in my recliner and share more stories with you guys. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time on Ansco's Adventures.